distant lands our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. Though great and diverse be our ethnicities, the bonds that unite us are stronger than these. We dine, we pray, we love, we dance and we play. We relate to each other, we'll rest in your way. Today as a people united, determined and steadfast we stand. We look to a brand new horizon, the future now firmly in our hands. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one.
Recording in progress.
Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. Hele, hele, bravo. Open you sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Naki you drum Caracom. Tabu ya tabu, awo. Open you sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. Hele, hele, bravo. Open your sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Hele, hele. Tabu ya tabu, awo. Naki your drum Caracom. Leve, leve, wow.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fireside Chat, which is the final event in the four-part webinar series titled Integrity and Safety in Residential Construction, the Role of Building Standards in Constructing Homes for the Future. We're delighted to have you all with us today. My name is Charlene Solozano, and I am the program lead for the Disaster Risk Management section at the Organization of American States and co-chair of the Physical and Environmental Planning Subcommittee, better known as PEPSIC. And I will be your host for this session. The PEPSIC has responsibility for providing overall guidance at the physical and environmental planning sector to ensure comprehensive disaster management is mainstreamed at the national levels and incorporated into development planning of national economies. Today, we will explore the key topic of advocating for policy support in building standards and guidelines, focusing on the essential roles of policymakers and local government officials. This conversation is particularly timely and crucial as we seek to close the loop on our discussions. Over the past 3 weeks, we've journeyed together. We began by introducing the Regional Code of Practice for Residential Construction, followed by a thorough review of the OECS Building Code and Guidelines. We then examined financing and incentives for resilient construction. And now we'll conclude our series by highlighting the pivotal role that policymakers and decision makers play in this important narrative. We're thrilled to have such an impressive lineup of speakers who will share their valuable insights, strategies, and real-world examples that you can implement right away. Before we dive in, I want to extend our heartfelt thanks to our sponsors, Global Affairs Canada and CIDIMA, for their vital support in making this webinar series a success. This entire 4-part webinar series is part of an $8 million Canadian project that has been instrumental in advancing comprehensive disaster management in the Caribbean since its inception in 2019. For more information, you can visit the website hostsbb.com. This series has been both thought-provoking and engaging, drawing participation from across the region and involving key stakeholders essential to our discussion. Thank you for being part of this important conversation. So without further ado, let's jump in. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed moderator, Senator Carolyn Trench Sandiford. With a remarkable career of over 25 years of experience in urban planning, she has been recognized as a leading advocate for equitable governance and planning and works tirelessly with public and private sector, academia, and civil society organizations in the development of safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable communities. Ms. Trench Sandiford currently holds the position of President of the Caribbean Planners Association and President of the Senate of Belize. Senator, the floor is yours.
I'm Stan, the Standards Man, and I'm here with a serious message for all homeowners. Build your house to last. Build your house to last. Every day hurricanes coming up fast. Build your house to last. You ready? Build your house to last. Hurricanes that barrel come across real fast. Think a mystery is all the parts. You got to build your house to last. You hear, Stan? Build your house to last. Make sure your money building something first class. Things tight and your money gotta stretch, but don't leave your life on the line to get tech. So family, build your house to last. Working with a code called CRCP10. Your bill already? Well, or dang, you can use the code to strengthen them. Remember that code CRCP10. Tell all the men and go and tell a friend. Don't let them more time move fast. Being as I say, build your house to last. Family, build your house to last. Wanna hear me? Build your house to last. Climate changing easy this toss, so build your house to last. Build your house to last. Build your house to last.
What a lovely jingle. Greetings to all, and thanks so much, Charlene, for your kind words of introduction. Once again, welcome to the 4th and final webinar in the webinar series, Integrity and Safety of Residential Construction, the Role of Building Standards in Constructing the Homes for the Future. As Charlene has indicated, this is the 4th. We've done building smart, building safe, and financing resilient construction. Now we will focus on advocacy for policy support in building standards, the crucial role of policymakers and decision makers.
Senator,
This session. do a
Can I
number of
interrupt you
things.
for a second, please? Can you please turn on your camera? Thank you so much.
And here I was talking and thinking I was being seen. But having said that, I will just continue because I'm figuring you all heard. So this session, we will delve into the crucial role of building standards and guidelines, such as the CARICOM Regional Construction Practice and the OECS Building Codes and Guidelines, to name two, in strengthening the resilience of housing. This session will examine how, through supportive policy, policymakers and local government officials can contribute to increased uptake of building standards and guidelines by stakeholders in the residential construction sector and achieve safer, more secure housing and communities across the Caribbean region. Through our shared experience today, it will offer practical strategies for gaining policy support for the adoption, application, and enforcement of the building standards and codes, as well as drawing on examples to illustrate successful approach. Finally, this session will also seek to foster collaboration among key stakeholders, including policymakers, local government representatives, and industry experts, to create a unified policy approach to building safety and resilience. This session will be for about an hour and a half. We will have a discussion with our 5 distinguished panelists, and thereafter we will proceed to a question and answer session. By the end of the session today, we're hopeful that you will have an intention to be an advocate, a champion for implementing building standards and building guidelines within your jurisdiction, your institution, within the next 12 months. We're also hopeful that you will have an increased awareness about the challenges faced by policymakers and the solutions necessary for increasing the implementation of building standards and guidelines in your countries. Our panelists as well, we're hopeful, ought to be willing after this session to engage in discussions and partnerships to develop incentive programs for contractors and homeowners to utilize building standards and guidelines. And from this, we will have specific policy measures that you would have identified to address the unique challenges facing the region and to support the long-term goal of elevated resilience and reduce disaster risk through the adoption and implementation of these standards and guidelines. However, before we really and truly delve into it, I want to do a couple reminders and some housekeeping matters. Kindly note that this webinar is being recorded and all the resources are going to be shared on the website, which will be shared with you and have been done so already by Charlene, but which will be shared with you in the chat. If you look to the bottom of your screen, you will find the chat box within which you can put observations and comments as we proceed with the discussion and the question and answer session. There is also a question and answer tab there where your questions are going to be answered. We're asking you to place your questions as they come to you as the discussion proceed. There is also a reaction feature. So if you hear something that triggers something or resonates with you, you can use that tab, or in the question and answer session, raise your hand. I want to also let you know that there are 2 polls that we're going to do today. There is the first, which is an initial poll, and then there will be the exit poll. Both will be conducted first to gain your knowledge, awareness of the subject matter on hand, and your willingness to champion, to lead, be advocate, to collaborate on uptaking the standards and guidelines. I also ask that everyone please and kindly participate in the poll. That is the only way we will get a feedback to improve as we go along. There is also going to be a challenge quiz, which will cover topics of the webinar, It will be very easy, multiple choice, true, false answers. And the link to the quiz will be activated at 8 o'clock tonight. And it will close on the 28th of September. So today is Wednesday, it's going to be activated. And it will be closed on Saturday, the 28th. So you have enough time to take the challenge. But I ask and I encourage you to do it very early because the webinar will be fresh in your mind. There will also be a certificate of participation. So we would want to ensure that your participation is recognized and acknowledged as a part of your continued professional development. That certificate will be awarded for those who would have attended at least 2 webinars, and it will be sent within 2 weeks of today. At this point, I would like to now introduce our first poll, which is the initial poll, and I'm asking all our participants, please complete it. 2 minutes to do so. So we're seeing a lots of, at least the first question I'm seeing, which familiarity with the building codes. I'm seeing quite a high number of people saying they're agreeing. The poll went down. Okay, it's up again. And there are several questions to the poll. And we're seeing some very good comments coming out of all of them. Very encouraging. People who are agreeing, strongly agreeing, but there's quite a number of disagreeing and strongly disagreeing and being neutral in terms of familiarity, in terms of understanding the impact of the poll, of the standards and codes. Quite a good number of persons have previously advocated for and been involved in adopting codes, which is excellent, very good. Again, there's considerably an amount of responses that speaks to agreeing and strongly agreeing, but as well be neutral and disagreeing, both in terms of aware of the strategies and legislative measures in CARICOM. And I am loving the committed to collaborate, strongly agreeing and agreeing. That is excellent, going beyond that 50% and being prepared to advocate. So we're getting some very good responses out of the poll. We're nearly there. We have 69% participation, climbing up 70%. Let us see if we can at least capture a 75% minimum. And we just about passed just about 75% and the poll has ended. And as I said, the results are very encouraging, particularly on those strongly agreeing and agreeing. And yes, there are areas that we need to improve on all, in terms of building awareness, in terms of understanding the impact of the codes, in terms of seeing quite a number of people have been involved in advocacy and collaboration, and I think this is wonderful. And the results, of course, will be shared with you. And I think I'm hopeful that as we proceed with this webinar, that some of those strongly disagree and neutral will be transitioning over to agree and strongly agree by the end of this poll. So thank you so very much for participating in the poll. I am seeing it says share results. I'm hopeful I touched the right button. And now I think we can move into the panel discussion, which is the main event of this webinar. Are we okay with doing that? To the host, just checking that we've
Yes, we
concluded
are.
the polls. Excellent.
Yes.
So we're hopeful, like I said, that what we've been seeing with the strongly disagree, and neutral will be moving over to the agree and strongly agree by the time this session is over. So I have this great pleasure, so delighted to introduce to you our 5 distinguished panelists who collectively bring a wealth of knowledge, expertise, and demonstrated experience on policy issues surrounding building codes and standards at the local level, at the national level, and at the regional level of decision making and policy, and in policy influencing spaces. First, we have from Dominica, Dr. Kira Paul. Dr. Paul is the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. She holds a PhD in social policy. She's well recognized for her deep commitment to community development, cultural preservation, social justice, and gender equality. She has been instrumental in leading many critical strategic planning and policy development and adoption initiatives in Dominica, including the National Resilience Development Strategy and the Climate Resilience and Recovery Plan, and other national policies aimed at advancing agriculture, energy and energy management, and the blue economy in Dominica. Welcome, Dr. Kira Paul. Our second panelist is from Jamaica. It is His Worship, the Mayor of Montego Bay, Richard Vernon. He is the youngest councillor to sit as a mayor in Jamaica and was a proud recipient of the Prime Minister's Youth Award for Excellence in the Leadership category. Mayor Vernon holds a Master's of Science with distinction in Development Studies, Governance, with a focus on governance and public policy. His leadership record spans over 15 years, so you know he's been doing this from a very young age. He has served in many capacities and continues to serve in many such capacities on several boards and committees, and has participated in many multilateral missions from Jamaica at meetings and conferences, regionally and globally, both as a speaker and the head of delegation on matters relating to local government and urban development. Our third panelist is also from Jamaica. He is Mr. Dwight Wilson, who is the Senior Director of the Technical Services and Major Projects Division, Ministry of Local Government and Community Development. He is a registered professional civil engineer with over 30 years of experience in project implementation. He has responsibilities for planning, design, construction, and maintenance of infrastructure and buildings, and for developing the building code for Jamaica. Our fourth panelist is from Bahamas. He is Craig Delancey and is the Building Control Officer for the Ministry of Works and Family Island Affairs. He's held this post for over 20 years and has responsibility for the administration and enforcement of the Building Regulations Act that governs the construction throughout Bahamas and oversight of the building codes. He's a registered and certified architect with double degrees, both a Bachelor of Science and a Bachelor in Architecture. And our fifth panelist is Mr. David Aline, originally from Barbados. His reach is regional as a representative, past president of the Insurance Association of the Caribbean, and is the CEO of Trident Insurance. He is a senior reinsurance executive with over 40 years of underwriting, claims management, risk management, reinsurance, administering business development, and marketing experience, well known globally and regionally, and he holds a master's in business administration. So We are ready for this discussion, which will be tailored around 4 key areas: raising awareness and building support for building standards and construction guidelines, developing targeted policy strategies, engaging and collaborating with stakeholders, and coalescing and implementing strategies, policies, and legislative measures necessary for the effective promotion, monitoring, and enforcement of standards and guidelines. So let's start this great conversation. I will start with David, Dwight, and Mayor Richard Vernon. We want you to identify 1 or 2 key challenges that you see or face policymakers and local government in adopting and implementing building standards. From a regional perspective and from the insurance sector, David Ali, can I hear from you?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And this is an extremely important topic relative to our industry and to our region as we face some severe ravages every hurricane season. From the insurance industry's perspective, the adoption of mandatory building codes and strict enforcement of them is critically important for the continued provision of sustainable insurance coverage for natural hazards and at reasonable rates. The industry, at least in Barbados, has been speaking with governments on the issue of our general underpreparedness to withstand major category hurricane force winds. And one of the challenges that we've been discussing and heard from government agencies is that the implementation of mandatory standards will negatively impact lower income earners. As such, there seems to be a reluctance to strictly enforce code and in Barbados to actually make it compulsory. While us in the insurance industry are not policy makers, that hesitancy is fully understood. The reality is that the responsibility of funding disasters and the gap left by those without insurance and by the country itself will fall squarely for the account of governments. In Dominica, the loss amounted to $1.3 billion from Beryl, over 220% of GDP. So unless we face and overcome our core challenges, we will continually face a cycle of using funds needed for development to repair our infrastructure. But I'll stop there and let one of our more esteemed panelists continue.
Thanks a lot, David. That was certainly a great challenge to identify. Now I'd like to go to Mayor Richard Vernon. Recently, Montego Bay, I think, was devastated by Hurricane Beryl. What is the key challenge that faced you and your community in terms of adopting and implementing building standards?
Thank you for that question, Madam Moderator, and hello to the viewers and fellow panelists. As a small island developing state, we are disproportionately affected by climate change. And as a result, we have to ensure that we build resilience to our building, or we go about managing our construction and abiding by the standards. When we look at the situation in terms of Jamaica and other small island developing states, we are relatively young in terms of our statehood and in terms of our democracy. Therefore, in moving forward, in advancing our countries, we have to review what we have legislatively as we continue to build out and to build more robust legislation to adapt to the challenges that we now face. So one of our core challenges now is to look at the regulations that we have, many of them outdated. Whilst we came with a new Building Act in 2016, which gave us much latitude to manage the areas, we have to now develop several regulations around that legislation to ensure that it is more proactive and that it becomes stronger as a legislation. So outdated legislation is one of our challenges. Another one is the capacity of municipal corporations, the local authorities to manage and to monitor and to even evaluate the building standards. here in Jamaica. And I believe that what we experience here is also similar to what is experienced elsewhere in the region. We do not have a capacity to hire enough staff members, for example, to monitor development, to ensure that persons are building within code and within standard. And that is another area of weakness for us. You said you needed two, but I have several more. I could give you one more. Another
Be
one
quick,
that we
be
have,
quick. You have 1 minute.
and yes, another one that we have, and it is widespread, is awareness, especially in low-income communities. Persons are not paid with building standards and sometimes don't even know that they need to abide by certain standards, and we need to do much more in that. But I guess we'll get to that when we talk about the strategies to counter these challenges.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. And now I'd like to ask Dwight Wilson, because you are at the ministry, so you not only cover one parish, but you do all. So can I get your perspective on this?
You are muted.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
I can. We can.
Okay, thank you very much and good afternoon to everyone. While Jamaica has had its challenges, I would say that we have made significant strides towards co-development and standards implementation. As Mayor Vernon mentioned, we have managed to pass our Building Act, which is now in effect. And that Building Act also gave birth to the National Building Code of Jamaica, which in our case is an adoption of the International Code Council's codes that we reviewed, put our local spin on, and now have as our national building code, to which all building standards must adhere. The Building Act also significantly created three bodies. One is a Building Appeals Tribunal, which allows for persons, individuals, companies to air any grievances they have in the building industry. It created the Building Advisory Council, which is a national body that is tasked to advise the minister on matters relating to buildings. And it also created, very importantly, a Building Practitioners Board. So we're not only looking at the standards and looking at the codes, but this board will ensure that all the practitioners, masons, carpenters, plumbers, tilers, everyone who is playing a part in the industry will be certified and licensed to practice in their relevant fields.
Excellent. So certainly from here, what we've got to understand is that some of the key challenges have to do with the cost of insurance and compulsory building code, the issue of antiquated regulations, the issue of knowledge and awareness of building standards, the issue of capacity. But what I was hearing from you, Dwight, was that Jamaica has moved towards a strategy which started with their act, their regulations, but as important, the practitioners within the industry at all levels to ensure that they're certified, which leads us, you've started that conversation for us, Dwight, and that leads us into our second question, which are the practical strategies, and you started that, and best practices that can be engaged within the Caribbean to overcome these barriers and these challenges and these gaps, whether they're regulatory, and you spoke to that, whether they're financial, whether they're technical, to adopting the building codes and guidelines, including awareness raising, because that was something the mayor spoke about earlier. So if I can start this session with Craig, who's from Bahamas, and perhaps can give us some insights into what would be one of the key challenges, and then he can start the conversation on strategies and best practices. And then we'll come back to you, Mayor and Dwight. So
Good afternoon.
Craig, the is yours.
Yes, good afternoon. I would like to preempt my response by saying that the Bahamas, we have had a building code in existence since 1971. and that came about through the Building Regulation Act. And so for the Bahamas, when it comes to whether the financial wherewithal for construction comes into play, we've sort of overcome that by having had the laws in place since 1971. And so that has helped us a long way in moving forward with our building standards and the integrity of construction. Now, I must say that the Bahamas is an archipelago of islands, and it's a challenge dealing with overseeing all of the various islands, and some of them are not as populated as others. And so that is where we have our challenges. But in terms of what we can do, I think part of it would be having frequent public service announcements, infomercials on various media platforms to make persons or local persons more aware of standards they need to attain in construction. We can also have seminars, put on seminars at various community centers and church halls or other gatherings, and stressing the importance of sound building standards for health, safety, and the welfare of its inhabitants or all of our local inhabitants. We also, since Hurricane Dorian, was able to publish an illustrative guide, what we termed as Build Back Better, which was in conjunction with the UNDP office, whereby we published a booklet that had many illustrations on various excerpts from the Bahamas Building Code, indicating the minimum standards, how to construct a building or residence from the ground level up to finished buildings. And so those were some of the areas I think can be used as, to try and encourage and make it more aware, persons more aware of how to build. And even though it may cost a little more, it would be for their benefit and their safety.
Excellent. And you spoke certainly as to a best practice, which is the Build Back Better booklet, but also identified some other strategies within the whole issue of raising public awareness, which is very key and very important. So I'll now turn back to Mayor Vernon and to ask what other strategy, practical strategy, best practice you feel can be implemented or have been implemented by you all in terms of overcoming the challenges that you identified.
We have to certainly remove the barriers to communication, which I believe we need to do by making the building code simpler in terms of the understanding of it, ensuring that the common man can understand what the code is and appreciate what it is. That's one I would say is necessary. Also, I think that we should ensure that for practitioners and those who are venturing into the field of building construction and planning, they are offered with the information from a very early stage. So I believe that they should be studying building codes from university. That is something that should be applied as well. What the St. James Municipal Corporation, which has responsibility for the city of Montego Bay, is doing now is to introduce the MEED program, which is the Municipal Environment and Energy Efficient Designs. We want to incentivize persons who are putting forward proposals around these areas to ensure that we reduce the carbon output and promote environmental sustainability. So these are some of the things that we could employ to improve the situation. Excellent. And that adds as well to the whole issue of public awareness, building public awareness, and one more has been from MEED
And I
Right.
thought that was something that was good because it added to the booklet spoken about earlier from Bahamas, which spoke a little about building back better and how we build back better. Mayor Vernon? No, I'm sorry, Dwight?
Yes.
Can you add anything to what has been said in this session?
Well, I think we are where we are in Jamaica because of a strategy that has proved very successful, which is extensive consultations covering the widest possible range of stakeholders. We have met for years with engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, the public. We're now meeting with the financiers, the insurance companies. And I think if I would say that it was the best practice, it is that broad-based, wide consultation that allowed us to have not just the act and the codes, but a proper working relationship with other players in the industry. We've also gotten specific because after Hurricane Beryl, what we found was that most of the homes that suffered wind damage did not have hurricane straps. And so we have started a program of public awareness around hurricane straps, and we are insisting that persons, when they're rebuilding after hurricanes or any other event, ensure that their buildings, where appropriate or where it's called for, have hurricane straps in place. So we take it from both a general level, and we also get specific in terms of actual solutions.
Absolutely. So you're talking about the general collaboration that is needed, and then something as simple as a hurricane strap, which is so very
Exactly.
important, particularly when it comes to the roofs, because
Precisely.
oftentimes that is where a lot of the
Precisely.
damage take place. Which then places us now at our third question, which is what more can be done by policymakers and local government to foster the enhanced relations with industry professionals towards increasing and adopting of building standards and codes. And we've been hearing quite a lot of that already from you all. Now we've moved from Jamaica, we've had the Bahamas, now we're going to Dominica. And I think in 2017, if I recall, Dominica was an island that was devastated by Hurricane Maria. If I recall, it had something like 95% of the housing stock was affected. So I'd like at this time to ask Dr. Kira Paul, who led the recovery effort, but as importantly comes from a social policy background, because sometimes we talk of buildings and that tend to be physical, but there's also the social side to recovery and to building standards and practice. So Dr. Paul, I will ask you to take over.
All right, thank you very much, Chair, and pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Yes, so Hurricane Maria in 2017 was a big eye-opener for the country. It meant that we had to revamp all of our policies that included our building guidelines. And so we would have set ourselves some ambitious targets, including the construction of 5,000 homes, resilient homes by 2030. That would be led by the government, but there is also the rule for the for homeowners who are driving that process themselves. On the social side of things, there is always the issue of affordability. We know that there are many low-income households who desire improved building standards, but just adhering to that building standard is actually maybe financially unattainable. There's a few strategies that government can, implement, which would include, of course, offering low-interest loans for homeowners, or probably getting the support of the private sector to ensure that developers, homeowners themselves adhere to the building standards. Introducing perhaps something like a reward system for compliance. It may mean that we have to now move to issuing certificates of occupancy and certificates of house completion to ensure that persons move into safe and resilient homes, because it's not just about adhering to building standards, but really bringing a focus on disaster resilience and long-term savings in the long run. There's a question of insurance premium, working with insurance companies to offer lower premiums for buildings that would comply with disaster resilient standards, of course, creating that financial motivation for property owners. And again, when we go back, most of the housing, if you would have taken stock of the type of houses that would have been destroyed, quite a bit of them were small houses that were already built to substandard. So government can also introduce subsidies to support their compliance and to ensure that there is equitable access to safe housing. On the other hand, there's also the technical strategies that can be implemented in terms of ensuring that there is access to updated tools and technology. So professionals themselves would have access to these construction tools, having access to materials that meet the standards, and so government can also encourage local production of building materials that meet that standards, reducing some of the import costs, and of course making compliant materials more accessible to the public. So that's about it in terms of my thoughts on some of the social vulnerabilities and what some of our technical capacities can be as it relates to ensuring that we are in a better position should Dominica be faced with another sister Hurricane Maria.
Absolutely, and those were excellent, as we have been hearing throughout this session, strategies, quite a lot, if I may say so, that we can learn from. But then Hurricane Maria was so devastating, I think, to the Caribbean. It was one of those that will remain in our memory, as was burial. Mayor Vernon and Dwight, any additions you would like to make to this particular area, looking at what could be done more by policymakers, what could be done more by local government? You've already highlighted a few already to foster the relations between the industry and the professionals.
Well, based on the structure of our government and how it operates, to get approval, for example, you need to get that through council at the local level, or building permits, you name it. We have to sign off on those. So I believe then that the policymakers themselves need to be trained in that area. They need to be properly exposed to it. I wouldn't even say certified. Maybe that would be a little bit extreme for them as political representatives, but they need to be properly exposed to these things. So you don't rubber stamp plans, but you know exactly what you're looking for and what you're approving. And what could also be done is to ensure that there is a type of sharing platform, so that the professionals and the best practices, they would get access to that information. I'll put it another way. So professionals would have access to best practices, updates, and all of those in a single space. And it could be a regional thing as well.
Yeah.
So if you have that and you have frequent sensitization, things change, policies change globally, and we have to adapt to those things. So once we get that information downloaded at the local level, then we update our policy or professionals rather about the changes and how we can build more resilient buildings. So these are some of the things that we could employ to ensure that we have more done from a policy standpoint to improve the sector.
Excellent. And Dwight, would you like to add anything from the national perspective?
Yes, quickly. With the acts and the standards and the codes, there comes the need for greater monitoring and enforcement. One of the things we have done is to look at our human resources within the local authorities, the ones who accept and review plans, and made provisions for greater numbers within each area, because the monitoring is going to be, and enforcement, they are going to be critical to have a sustained success. Training also, I think we have looked at the needs of our existing staff. We have partnered with local universities, and we have designed and implemented training programs specifically for building officers and building officials that will enable them to be at the top of their craft and be able to both implement the codes and give us proper and effective monitoring. So training and human resources, I think, from a policy standpoint, those are critical.
Excellent contributions as to what more can be done. And I think we keep hearing that throughout, that what's so very important is the monitoring, but to monitoring, you monitor, even to build the awareness, you need to have the capacity to do that. And so that then takes us into a fourth and final question for this session. And I can tell you, I have no doubt that our participants are enjoying this. I'm seeing a lot of questions already coming in, a lot of interventions, observations, comments coming in. So let's try to wrap this up so we can move straight into that. Now, what are some incentives and capacity building initiatives that can be adopted to encourage the widespread uptake of building standards in the region? And I'm going to put this question back to Dr. Paul. You had identified quite a number of areas in terms of social vulnerability, how to address that. What would be some areas you think in terms of the incentives and capacity building to encourage this, make more use of our building standards? They're there. The CARICOM codes are there, the OECS codes are there. Why is it that we are not using them as much as we ought to? I would like to hear also from Craig. I know Bahamas is, like you said, the archipelago, it's an archipelago, lots of islands, geographic issues, and then from the insurance sector. So question, what incentives and capacity building initiatives can be adopted, one or two, to encourage the widespread uptake of building standards across the region? Dr. Paul, and then Craig, and then David.
Okay, thank you very much. One of the things I think that a lot of times when we discuss about building standards, resilience, and built environment, we always think about from construction from ground up. I think there is also a space for the conversation for retrofitting of our existing structure, particularly because we are in a space where we're constrained by financial resources, whether that be at the government level or that be at the homeowner level. It means, therefore, we have to start incentivizing persons as well for retrofitting their existing structures to resilient standards. It also means that we have to make sure our messaging is very targeted and our messaging is very consistent, even if it's targeted. So we have persons, you want to build awareness about the risk of living and remaining in unsafe homes, but you also want to ensure that you have messages that is very clear that pertains to inspection, that pertains to the technical work, but you also have the awareness that you want to raise among homeowners. We also have to think about the actual planning process itself in terms of your development application. What is that application process like? How onerous is that? How costly is that? We may want to consider reducing some of our permit fees. Again, I mentioned about tax breaks and subsidies. And when we think about construction, we also have to think about a number of other things to ensure, that the building codes, there is the health and safety that we have to think about. There is also energy efficiency that we have to think about. So we may not necessarily want to incentivize on a holistic level, but you may want to also incentivize looking at various aspects of the built environment.
Thank you for that. And Craig, going back to the Bahamas. You're on mute. The floor is yours.
Sorry. Yes, I was saying that so many of my colleagues are on the same page as far as incentives and capacity that you can use. I think one of the areas would be talking to the insurance companies about offering more incentives and reductions in premiums on homes that are being built or meeting the minimum code standards. I think it depends too on your income level, but we find in the Bahamas, most of our buildings are being built through valid building permits, and they are being inspected, and how to obtain an occupancy certificate at the end of the day. So I think if insurance companies can offer some incentives to help in reducing the premiums on house insurances, that may help along the way, encouraging persons to make sure that they're building to standards. I think also that the government authorities can perhaps reduce tariffs or duties on essential building supplies to make construction more cost effective to the homeowner. And also making sure that the building supply companies, that they are passing these reductions on to the customer, especially on items like hurricane straps, and making sure that they're the right standards or sizes that are required to make sure that the building can meet minimum wind forces. I think also training, we have to have more training amongst the building inspectors and contractors, building contractors. They need more education on what is expected in construction and to ensure that they meet the minimum code standards. We in the Bahamas, we have our building code, and we're actually in the process of upgrading that code now. And like Jamaica, we are also using the International Code Council's code as our base. And we hope within the next year or so, we would be able to have that fourth edition available to the local community.
Excellent. So, David, I think they passed the ball to you. They were talking about the reduction of insurance premium.
Definitely
So your
passed.
comment and your contribution on the incentives and capacity building initiatives that can be adopted to encourage the uptake of the standards across the region.
Sure, baton definitely passed. In respect of capacity building and the incentives from the insurance industry, capacity building really, from an insurance perspective, would relate to the amount, the availability of insurance that the industry can provide for securing assets. And the incentives, obviously, as Craig was saying, relates to the level of rating. I want to point out something. Over the last couple of years, the reinsurers that support this region have reduced their support. Companies in the Caribbean have had to reduce the amount of growth for two reasons. The price has not been at the level that reinsurers want, and then the amount of aggregate, the amount of sum insured that they want to give the region is not there because of the return on equity. Price and availability of insurance is guided by financial computer models. And included in determining factors are construction standards, the ability of our home building stock to withstand hurricane force winds. So improving our building stock in respect of the ability to withstand at least category 2 or 3 hurricanes is critical to reducing the cost of insurance and actually to ensuring that we have sustainable capacity going forward. So those are the two things that I think would be important to understand. The availability of insurance and the price is dependent on our standard of construction.
That is great, and it's a great way to move into the question and answer segment. You all have said quite a lot, and like I said, I see lots of questions already. I see lots of hands going up, but there's also been a lot of what I consider support in what you have been saying that has been triggering the thumbs up and the clapping of the hands and so on and so forth. So what you've been saying have resonated with our participants. Now I'm going to ask my colleague, Leonard Francis, to assist in facilitating the question and answer session. As I had indicated at the onset, you can submit your question via the chat, or you can submit it via the question and answer feature. Your questions can be general, and so we can then direct it to anyone on the panel, or they can be specific. Then we direct it to a particular panelist, and the questions will be answered as they come in.
Just for clarity, Madam President Square, are you seeing the questions in the question and chat?
I am seeing the chat, and I am seeing, okay, good.
So I will read the question for you then. All right.
Yes.
The question from Tony Gibbs. I understand that an engineering graduate can become registered with only 2 years experience. Do the building regulators consider that to be satisfactory?
Anyone wish to take that question? We have spoken about capacity building and training.
Well, in the Bahamas, we do have the Professional Engineers Act, and we have also the Professional Architects Act. In order to become a professional engineer, you must have either passed one of the international professional exams and have acquired that license, and then you can be that can be reciprocated to the Bahamas, or you must have had gone through the preliminary training of in professional engineers, in particular in the U.S. and Canada, and have attained the minimum standards, and it's more than 2 years. You also have to take an exam.
All right, the next question, and it's a follow-up. What regulations and guidelines are used to determine what is considered sufficient number of years of training to be an engineer?
I believe that was answered in terms of the Bahamas in saying that there's a requirement to become a registered professional engineer. Is that the same in Dominica and in Jamaica?
Yeah, in Jamaica, we have a similar arrangement. For example, the JIE, the Jamaica Institution of Engineers, you have to be examined by that body. It can be an exam, it can be a verbal interview, but essentially you have to prove that you have not just knowledge, but experience in the particular discipline or branch of discipline in which you would like to register as a professional engineer. And usually it takes more than 2 years worth of experience. In terms of the being an engineer in the first place, most of the courses are at least 3 years, if my memory serves me correct. And so it requires that amount of time to graduate as a civil engineer or an engineer in general within the Caribbean generally. And then beyond that, you can pursue becoming a professional registered engineer.
All right, next question.
Next question, Leonard.
Yes, I'm here. How do we marry the use of and even any enforcement a building code with low income and informally constructed houses? Adhering to building standard seems to be an expensive and unattainable for many. Any solutions?
I think Dr. Paul, you had given us quite a number of solutions there. Could you answer that?
You're muted.
You're muted, Dr. Paul.
Sorry. I mentioned previously about the opportunity that retrofitting provides, particularly for vulnerable households. I think that there's an avenue there to incentivize through grants, also through partnerships, public-private partnerships with financial institutions. There's quite a bit, even on the side of trade and the imported materials that would be used to meet some of the standards. There can be incentives that are not provided directly to homeowners, but to the businesses in the local production of materials. So we spoke quite a bit about some of it.
Okay, next question, Leonard.
I was just wondering if any of your panelists would like to try that one as well. Because I know that your worship had actually...
Yes, yes.
Yes, good.
Well, in the Bahamas, we in the Ministry of Housing, they have a unit that deals with assisting low-income persons with repairs to their homes and bringing them up to the standard code, local code standards. The other thing is that we have a lot of unregulated communities in the country, and we've witnessed the devastation of how many of these structures have been destroyed, and also lives in the last Hurricane Dorian. The majority of the devastation was in those unregulated communities. And right now, the government has mandated that all unregulated communities must be removed, and for persons to seek housing in regulated areas, in buildings that are meeting standards, the minimum standards. And so there is a program going on now with the removal of unregulated buildings throughout the country, and it's both locals and migrants who have been living in those areas. And since the hurricane, it's made it more, it's come to light more that we need to make sure that our housing stock can withstand some degree of hurricanes.
Excellent. And if we want to try to get through as much of these questions as possible, I'm going to ask for responses to be very short and sweet. Go ahead, Leonard.
Okay.
The mayor wanted to say something. I was just...
Okay.
Okay, I was just saying that the code itself, the standard itself is not expensive. It is what the code tells you to do. What amount of this you need to use, what amount of that. So then it has to be a broader conversation about the management of prices in the construction industry, for example, and then how to deal with that conversation, circumvent the pricing conversation in the construction industry, and put a policy as to how to deal with that, because a code is a code and it tells you how best to build to ensure safety and well-being. Now, the next thing is, in Jamaica, what we have done to ensure that low-income earners can actually get a shot at owning a home is to enable them to put the contribution together for 3 persons. So, for example, if you're in a house with your father, your mother, and your the child, obviously, and you're all working and you have made your contribution to the National Housing Trust, you can merge all 3 contributions together to purchase a home or to even build a home. So these are some of the things from another policy standpoint you can look at to manage prices and to promote home ownership. But the code is a code, and it is just telling you to build safely.
All right. Next question is code compliance asked for in Jamaica by the insurance and lending finance companies?
I would say we're getting there. Historically, I don't think it was an absolute requirement. But now that we have the act in place, and now that we've seen increased risks, not just from hurricanes, by the way, but also from earthquakes, which is also another major consideration. And as mentioned before by my fellow panelists, the cost of insurance and reinsuring. We are getting to the point now where lending agencies, financial institutions want to see those things in place. Certainly, the building permit, the permit to build, is usually required, and that has been so for a while. But we're getting to the point now where the financial institutions and insurance want to see that everything is fully compliant with the latest laws.
Okay,
Yeah,
now
I'd
this
like
is
to
an
say-
interesting one. The suggestions appear to target the public. What are the panelists' thoughts on strategies that can be used to advocate national policy makers to understand the urgency of adopting the Caribbean Code of Practice for the construction of homes?
Interesting one indeed. Anyone want to take this up? Dr. Paul?
Yeah, I was gonna, yes. I think there may be others, but I think two things stands out. Data-driven advocacy, we need to ensure that we use the data or experiences from some of the past and recent hurricanes, and storms and other forms of natural disasters to demonstrate the economic, the social, the human cost of inadequate building practices, and also enforcement. And I think we also need to maybe do the deep cost benefit analysis that will allow us now to compare the upfront investment cost that is needed versus the long-term cost for responding to disasters.
All right. Now, this is another interesting one. What incentives are being developed or offered to allow consumers to be able to build better? How does the insurance cost factor into this aspect as well? So what incentives are being offered or developing to allow consumers to be able to build better?
Well, we spoke about that a little while earlier in terms of the rates that the insurance industry allows. Dwight was talking about what is occurring in Jamaica. The fact is that the capacity for insurers to write the regions, protect the region's assets is under pressure because reinsurers are withdrawing their support. The companies will probably move towards a position whereby people have to have a certain standard in order to get insurance cover. And so that is one of the things that the insurance company is going to be looking at.
All right, so somebody's making a statement. Offer lower rates of insurance for houses which comply with codes. That's a statement. No. So I don't know if panel is going to do that, but that's a statement. No. Another question. What hazards will the building code treat to? I'm aware that building for an earthquake is a bit different to that of a tropical weather system. I know you answered that before, but just in case, quickly.
Perhaps the engineer, one of the engineers can take that. You're muted, Dwight.
The codes cover all risks. It covers hurricane designs, earthquake designs. The original ICC codes even cover snow loads, which won't apply to us, obviously. So we took those out. But in essence, the codes cover every possible risk from every possible source of loading.
Okay, thank you. Now, this is coming from an architect in Jamaica. 1 minute. I don't know what happened. Something just skipped a little while ago. 1 minute. Just give me a minute. Okay.
But there is another one that says codes and guidelines need to be readily available to all citizens through infographics. And do you know series? Persons may listen more closely whenever a hurricane hits the nation. And I think we heard quite a lot of that from our panelists in terms of improving knowledge awareness, the pamphlets, organizing town meetings, and so on and so forth. And then there is, as an architect in Jamaica, we have found having consultancy with the planning agents a most useful means of ensuring that codes were met, particularly the intention of the codes. Is there an opportunity for these consultancies to return and to be formalized? I am not familiar with the Jamaica situation, but maybe someone from Jamaica can respond to that.
Mr. Wilson, you want to take that one or you want me to go ahead? But what I could say about what we do in St. James, for example, is to engage we have the architects and we have the draftsmen who are not yet architects. They are pursuing that, but they still present plans. We do workshops and certify them, but we do not do it often enough, and we should. So that is something that we're looking at to ensure that we keep the sensitization process going, keep the information flowing. When new information arises, we call them into a workshop and update them on what the new requirements are. And this is how we can continuously engage the professionals and practitioners in the field to ensure that they're up to date and they know what they're doing to apply themselves.
All right, next question. Are the updated building codes going to cover the issue of wastewater discharge from sinks, showers, grey water, surface runoff in residential design, aside from water closet, sewage treatment, which is traditional, well, I hope it's water closet, which is traditional, covered independently with septic tanks? Okay.
That's a very good question.
Anyone updating their code could respond to that? Bahamas?
I don't know if it was targeted mainly at Jamaica, but the Bahamas Building Code, as it is now, covers the discharge of wastewater and sewage treatment. So all that is already covered in our codes. If you're doing new construction, especially commercial buildings, the law says that you must discharge the runoff onto your own property.
In support of that, I would say the short answer is yes. The codes and the conditions enforced by the local authorities require that the applicant must show the safe collection, treatment, and discharge of all wastewater.
Oh, the Jamaica is getting very popular here. Yeah.
And we do have about 8 more minutes to go,
yes.
so if
yes.
we can move along.
All right, so in Jamaica, is building control for domestic homes conducted in the same way as building control for institutional, commercial, and industrial buildings? If there are differences, what are they?
The processes are the same. As Mayor Brown indicated, in Jamaica, all building approvals must come to the local authorities. They are the ones who review building plans and grant approval. There are inputs from other agencies, but the building permission must be issued by the local authority. And the considerations in principle are the same, whether it's a 2-bedroom house or a hotel or a business place. There are certain things that must be met. And I think where we differ is in the other agencies that are required to have input in the decision-making process. But in essence, the process remains the same.
And in addition to that, just want to do one simple difference, and it's not really different, but in terms of the magnitude it is. So for the residential, we would assign the building officer that carries out routine inspection to ensure that you are building according to the plan. But for the commercial development, especially the large-scale ones, we have more than one officer assigned to the project itself, and not just popping up to check on it, but they are assigned to the project to ensure that by virtue of the size of the project, we have enough coverage for monitoring. So that's the only difference I could see. But as Mr. Wilson said, everything else remains the same.
All right, so I'm going to do one last question because there's a wrap-up period that has to be done. So I'm going to do one last question. The other questions that have not been answered, they will be answered in a written form. All right, so this is the last one. Can all building inspections be locked into home insurance? Also, can inspections have photos to show proof of inspections?
Absolutely, I would think that that is something that could be done. Insurance companies send out surveyors right now to make sure that houses are adequate for insurance, so that inspections could easily be locked in and made part of the process of ensuring that our homes are adequately constructed and that the insurance policy is covering a home which is built according to the code. So that could absolutely be done. It's whether in a competitive environment all insurance companies will sign on to that process.
Madam Chair?
Great. Yeah, I am going through the other questions, and as usual, I happen to be a planner, so I need to at least read one that speaks to land use planning being fragmented and governed by dated complex legislative framework, and that the process can be better streamlined from a regulatory standpoint. Development review reforms are required in policy and practice, especially as it relates to timelines and as of right development order permissions. And there's a continuous process to speak of land use planning. And as a planner, we always say that disaster risk reduction is not only about what you build and how you build, it's where you build. And sometimes that's where the planning and land use component starts. There's also a question here, which I think is very important, which speaks to how is the general public made aware of certified professionals and tradesmen? Can there be a centralized online hub for finding certified personnel with a review mechanism? This may also be an incentive for persons to become certified. So I'm going to leave it at that. We have quite a number of other questions, but as the time has caught up with us, I am then going to close this session, and I think it then comes back to the closing statements from our panelists. And so I'm going to ask each panelist if you can give me a 30-second one-liner takeaway. Just one line, 30 seconds, as to what is the message you want to leave as a panelist regarding building standards and building codes. And I can start with perhaps Dr. Paul.
Yes, thank you. I think key is to recognize that the built environment is very dynamic. It is evolving. We know historically that the trigger is really, well, for many of us, the trigger is really of natural disasters. So it is something that we need to keep at the forefront of our discussions at all levels, and that the advocacy for improvement has to be holistic.
Thank you. Mayor Richard Vernon, 30 seconds.
While we continue to upgrade the regulations to ensure that they are fit for purpose, we have to ensure also that we take into consideration the current climate situation so that we can build resilience, promote environmental sustainability to ensure safety and well-being.
Dwight Wilson, 30 seconds.
The Caribbean is a vulnerable area, and the standards and codes can literally be the difference between life and death. So I think from that perspective, we all have a responsibility to ensure that we are aware of the codes and, more importantly, we use them.
Craig DeLancey.
Yes, my takeaway would be ensuring that when it comes to construction or building, that you make sure that you have a valid building permit that would have been scrutinized to ensure that it's meeting the minimum standards for construction, and also to have the mandatory inspections done during the construction phase. That is part of our laws, and so I just would like to say that a person should ensure that they follow the regulations.
Excellent. And David Aline from the insurance industry.
Hi, the frequency and severity of storms that we're going to face going forward is going to mean that to maintain the support of the world's reinsurers to protect our assets means that we must upgrade the state of our housing stock.
Thank you so much for those 30 seconds one-liner. Now I ask for the final poll to be run. This is the after. You did a first poll, and now we're doing the post-webinar poll. We have 2 minutes. I ask each and every one of you to, and I encourage you to kindly fill out the polls. And these are most encouraging. I'm certainly seeing a lot of agreeing that the webinar has improved knowledge, that they understand the building standards, contributing to disaster risk reduction and community resilience, that they're committed to being advocates. This is so wonderful for the adoption and enforcement of building codes, that they feel equipped to develop or support policy strategies that promote the adoption of building codes, and that they're prepared to initiate or participate in collaborative efforts with community leaders, industry professionals, and financial institutions to promote building standards. I'm seeing excellent responses as it relates to agree and strongly agree. The poll has turned upside. Initially, we were half and half going into the strongly disagree, disagree, neutral, agree, strongly agree, but it is more so now saying agree and strongly agree. We're at 56% of the poll. I'm asking, let us try to reach that 75% that we did in our first poll and going above that. We only have about 10 more seconds to go actually. 61% climbing up. And again, the strongly agree and agree really doing the other questions. So the poll has ended at 64% participating. And as I have said, in all questions, we have seen a strong response in terms of agreeing and strongly agreeing to the questions posed. And as time is against us, I would like to use this opportunity to thank all the panelists and participants for joining us on this webinar. It has certainly been insightful, engaging, invigorating, and I now hand over the panel, the webinar to the host who will launch that final evaluation survey about the webinar. I hand over to you, the host.
Okay, so I want to thank the moderator and panelists, and I want to see the audience with some thumbs up and some applause. Your insights on the challenges like outdated legislation, capacity issues, and high insurance costs were quite eye-opening, but I particularly appreciated your thoughtful solutions such as public awareness campaigns, community engagement, insurance incentives, and simplifying communication to make these issues accessible to everyone as a great way to move forward. So at this time, can we get the QR code up on the screen? And we just ask that everyone can take the time to complete this SurveyMonkey evaluation questionnaire.
Yes. So while we are completing the SurveyMonkey, just to do the final wrap-up, as you know, this is the final of the four-part series of this Integrity in Residential Construction webinar series. And we are so excited as the members of the Physical and Environmental Planning Sector Subcommittee to see the feedback and the responses that we have received concerning this webinar series. And I want to invite the Pepsi members to just give a round of applause because you won't be able to hear. Excellent. We started on the 4th of September. And we've done it every Wednesday in the month of September, 90-minute sessions. And when you hear some of the feedback that I will recap very quickly, you will see that there's a call for more time, especially for questions and answers. The time just goes so quickly. But this virtual event, as you have heard, has been facilitated through the financing of the Global Affairs Canada. And we are so happy to have brought you expert presentations, panel discussions, question and answers, and you would have heard that we will award a certificate of completion once you have completed at least 2 of these sessions. We started out at 6:30, the first 2 sessions, and these last 2 at 2 p.m. Because of the different audiences that we were seeking to attract. In our first session that was entitled Building Smart, Understanding the Regional Code of Practice for the Construction of Houses in the Context of Other Building Standards and Guidelines, we would have heard a very insightful presentation by Dr. Grenville Phillips. In fact, when I looked at the survey responses, we had a significant number of participants that said that that presenter, his content was up to date, they identified with it, up to 94%. So that was an outstanding presentation. And 87% of the participants in that series indicated, those who took the survey, that is, that they felt that they were sensitized to CRCP 10/2023, but of course 75% of them thought they needed more time for Q&A. For that first session, we didn't have a lot of time for Q&A, but we did answer the questions, and those are on our website. Over the last 2 sessions before this one, that particular area of Q&A, or having enough time for the webinar, is one that, you know, has been in the 70s, right? And so some of the recommendations were we need to have more time for the questions and answers. And we did try to give some time today. Last week, we rose from 75 to 77%, people being satisfied with the amount of time that they had for the webinar and for the Q&A. And so we are quite happy with the turnout, the content being relevant to professional needs. We had up to 93% last week, and the week before that, 94%, where persons felt that the content that we have been able to offer has been relevant to their professional needs, and we are quite happy about that response. In our second session, we focused on the OECS Building Code and Regional Building Standards, and we looked at, you know, some of the challenges that were being experienced and how we could overcome some of these barriers. That presentation by Dr. Janora Joseph generated quite a number of questions, but what I want to highlight is that 96% of individuals were happy with the presentation that they received. And when we went to our presentation on financing resilient construction, incentives and support for compliance, which was last Wednesday, 96% of persons taking that survey said, I am committed to supporting incentives for implementing building standards. And another 93% said, I am committed to engaging in discussions to increase incentives or support adoption in construction risk management. Isn't that great? Isn't that great? And so when we just even listen to the results of the poll and the interest and the commitment, we see it continues even into today's presentation. And we did set out with 4 main objectives, or should I say expected outcomes, as a result of this series that included increased understanding and commitment amongst contractors, artisans, engineers, inspectors, and so on. Awareness and support from financial and insurance providers to make building standards, such as CRCP 10/2023, and just overall national building standards, a requirement for financing and insurance. And we heard the conversation today. We have been able to achieve this. We have built awareness. We've even gotten some commitment. We also set out to increase awareness amongst policymakers and local government representatives to champion the adoption, and I heard that today. And we also finally set out to increase awareness and willingness amongst policymakers, local government, financial insurance providers to advance discussions and partnerships to develop incentive programs. And we have achieved these outcomes, and we're quite pleased with this. What I want to say as I bring the curtains down further is that we look forward to supporting the conversations, to having more webinars. Today is the second day of a 2-day Pepsi meeting being held in Barbados, and part of this meeting includes identifying a strategic work plan as to how the physical and environmental planning sector subcommittee can support recovery in Grenada and in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and more further, the priorities of the region on physical resilience, of which one of those priorities is building standards. Listening to the conversation today about awareness raising, training, simplifying information, advocacy, all these things, these are areas that the Pepsi has been discussing. And as we look to next steps, certainly SEDIMA in the next couple of weeks, we will be advancing further training in at least 8 countries. In CRCP 10/2023, St. Lucia has completed theirs already, but what this will be accompanied by will also be sensitization, local webinars, and for that sensitization to take place. And members here in Barbados, and some of them who participated online, have also committed to further discussing and planning for how we can advance further with technical assistance to countries, as well as advancing policy conversations and discussions that can allow us to move to action. This webinar series has been a call to action, and I pray that what we have started here will continue. We leave with you the website. It continues to be active, HOSTSBB. That is still active, and on that website you can access CRCP 10/2023, and you can also access other resources. A new website has also been launched, which you can access from the SEDIMA website, and from Friday you can access the Learner's Guide, the Pocket Guide, and so on. That would have been presented by Dr. Phillips. Those are available. Other areas for follow-up. Participants identified that they would like more training opportunities and more webinars, so this is something that we'll be looking to take forward, as well as CPDs. Persons have been asking about their continuing professional development and getting points for that. We will be following this up, so you can watch that space for further information concerning the CPDs. We invite you also to take the challenge quiz, which is available as well. So on that note, colleagues, those who may still be online, we thank you and we invite you to continue to engage with us. We have just started, the work is not ended. And we as a Physical and Environmental Planning Sector Subcommittee are pleased to have been able to host this webinar series, and we look forward to doing more for the region in this regard. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and build your house to last.
Let's hear the song before they leave.
I'm Stan, the Standards Man, and I'm here with a serious message for all homeowners. Build your house every day. You have to last. Cause think it's all the parts. You got your house to last. Yeah, build your house. Sure your money bills. Things but don't leave your little. So family house to last. Working with a code called CRCP 10. Your bill already? Well, alright then. You can use it to strengthen them. Remember the code CRCP 10. Tell all the men and go and tell a friend. Don't let them more time move fast. BNS, how you say? Build your house to last. Family, build your house to last. Wanna hear me? Build your house to last. Climate changing, easy this toss, so build your house to last.